Alrighty, guys, let's go ahead and get started again for our 11 a.m.-ish session. Thank you, Sandy. That's the second time that's been asked, which is it's a good question, really good question. All right, I've got some good questions already that people have handed me for the Q&A session that we'll do at the conclusion of this session. We'll do Q&A till about 12:15-ish. 12:15-ish. We'll put a limit on that one since we want to get away for lunch, since we have something going on after that. The session later on in the day, after the final session at 2, that Q&A session, we can extend a little bit since we don't have a hard end for that particular session. But again, thankful that each and every one of you are here. For those who are tuning in online, we appreciate your interest as well in our inaugural Weekend in the Word. These sessions or these studies that we're going to do each spring are just focused on a specific topic or text or idea, subject, something of that nature. We want to bring in individuals who have a particular expertise in these particular areas so they can share their knowledge and wisdom with us so that we can be more grounded in the faith. So we're especially thankful that Saif has come to be with us this weekend, and we appreciate his first session, just giving us some background. And hopefully what he shared with us, he witnessed, was spurring on more conversation. And hopefully that will continue through the lunch period here in a bit, and also when we get together later on. It'll just give a lot of good seeds for conversation with him, and I know he'll appreciate having those conversations with y'all. So I'll go ahead and let him have the floor once again. This session is going to focus on principles of Islam and comparing and contrasting those with principles with Christianity. Once he concludes, we'll take just a couple minutes for me and him to get sorted as far as the Q&A goes, and we'll get right into that. And like I said, we'll go to about 12:15-ish, and then we will break for lunch. But again, we're so thankful that you all are here, and we're thankful for those who are tuned in online. Saif, again, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. And thank you for your good attention. In this section, we're going to be, as Nick said, we're going to be looking at the similarities and differences between Christianity and Islam. And this will be a little bit shorter, and this will be a lot of academic information, a lot of really practical information. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And I'm pleased to tell you that there are plenty of similarities, which is good. We want to be able to have common ground with people. If we're trying to talk with people, I think that's a great place to start. Even if you go. It doesn't matter where you go. You don't even want the person serving you a sandwich at Chick-fil-A. You'd prefer to have common ground with them rather than not, right? Because then you're wondering what's in your sandwich. Maybe not Chick-fil-A, but maybe somewhere else you're wondering. So, common ground is a good thing. It is a good thing. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the similarities and the differences. And again, I'm pleased to say that there are a lot, but it's going to be a lot like this. It's going to be like, what are we talking about? And then we're going to have the Christianity side, for example, and then the Islamic side. And me just giving you can read these if you want. I'll read them basically to you and then just kind of explain it to you. And this will answer some of your questions as well, and it probably will raise some questions about some things as well, which is good. So the first thing is, when we look at the origin of name, Christianity, they were first called Christians at Antioch. We understand that. So we'll kind of briefly touch on does this have is the red button the laser pointer?
I'm going to assume so. Let's find out. There you go. Yes.
I didn't want to burn a hole in it in case it was super powerful, and you never know. So yeah, we'll spend most of the time over here, but we'll reference the Christianity side, obviously. So Islam derived from the Arabic word submission and peace, and Muslims are followers of Islam. Islam means to submit to the will of Allah. Okay, there's a lot there that could be asked, so let me get after that. Islam is the name of the religion. Muslims are followers of the religion. So like Christianity, Christians. Islam, Muslims. And then Allah. Is Allah the same God? Ask me that in the Q&A and allow me the full sense of answering the question, but I'll answer it in this way. Allah is Arabic for God. Okay? So is it the same God? In the sense of Jehovah, in the sense of Yahweh, yes. The Judaism, Islam, Christianity, all on the same page about what in the Old Testament we will learn as Yahweh or Jehovah. All right? In terms of, the rest of it, again, that's where Jesus comes in, and then you got to ask me in the Q&A if we want to go further than that. But yeah, when you're talking about, when someone says Allah, the huge positive about that is that they believe that there is the one God. They believe that there is the Yahweh, there is the Jehovah. And that is an incredible, you want to talk about having common ground? You want to have common ground about something? That's a pretty good one to have common ground with. Okay, holy books. We have the Bible, written over 16 centuries by many inspired writers, all inspired by the Holy Spirit. And then the Quran, what they believe is that the Quran was dictated to the Prophet Muhammad, who is the Prophet of Islam, by the angel Gabriel in a cave, in a series of sessions. Was dictated to him by the angel Gabriel, and after about 23 years, they had the compilation of the Quran. So basically what they say is that Muhammad would go off to these caves, and that in these caves the angel Gabriel visited him one time and told him that there was only one true God, because Muhammad grew up in, which was pretty normal for the time, to be back and forth between idolatry. Muhammad in the time in Mecca, in Arabia, this was an idolatrous place. They were worshiping idols. This was the main thing that they were doing. So for him to go and get this revelation that there's only one God was pretty significant given the context of where they were living and what they were doing. Place of worship. We come together on the first day of the week in remembrance of Jesus. We are the church, the ecclesia, the called out ones, right? In Islam, they have the mosque. So the mosque is basically their place of worship. Muslims are to pray 5 times daily, and the holy day is Friday. So, we might look at our holy day, so to speak, as Sunday. It's really every day, right? Every day is the holy day. And I think it's the same in Islam, that they would expect to be righteous and live godly every day. But their day that they actually go to visit the mosque, apart from just going for prayer, Friday is more of a special, unique day. There'd be some reading from the Quran. They might have, like an event after or something like that. But it's their holy day and their special day. World population, again, this is people who are claiming to be Christians. This number is actually, some will tell you 30 to 33, and some will tell you 30 to 35% of people in the world claim to be Christians. In Islam, 20 to 23, some people will tell you it's 23 to 25% of the world population. But I think that this should help you. This probably should stir some questions in your mind. One question that I get asked often, which again, save it for the Q&A if you want to hear about it. That way I don't burn any more time away from that. But why it's a big population. That's a lot. 25%. It's not far behind Christianity, and we think that the world is dominated with Christianity. It is the world's leading religion, Christianity, and Islam is right behind it, and it's growing. And sometimes people ask me, why do you think that is, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we'll save that. But I think this underscores the need. Some people have said, why do we need to know about this? Because there's a lot of people that are Muslims, and we're supposed to evangelize. Who are we evangelizing? Christians? We're not evangelizing, this majority. We're evangelizing the next majority. Divisions. There's only one true church. Christ is not divided. I understand, and that was a huge stumbling block for me, all of the thousands upon thousands upon thousands of supposed denominations. Okay, but the truth is that Christ is not divided, and we don't believe that. In terms of Islam, they have 2 main divisions. They have the Sunni Muslims and the Shia Muslims, and the dispute is over who should succeed Muhammad when he died. Just for a reference point, this is about 90% of Muslims that are Sunni, and about 10% that are Shia. So this is not like it's a little bit different, right? It's a little bit different than, you got 20% over here, you got 20% over here, you got some over here, or 50-50. It's not close. The dispute basically is the Sunnis believe that when Muhammad died, that Muhammad's closest friend should have been the one that took over. And the Shias believe that it should be kept in the family, so it should have been his son-in-law that took over. The nature of God, one God who exists in three distinct persons, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, otherwise known as the Godhead, right? In Islam, they do not accept the Godhead. They believe that there is one God, and that is Allah, and they believe that when we try and talk about the Godhead, that we're talking about three different people. Which may be another question. I'm kind of like seeding questions here, but okay, that's good. Saif, how did you understand the Godhead, and how do you explain the Godhead? Great question, and we can get there. But in Islam, it's rejected. It's rejected, by the way, by everybody except Christians. So I know we're talking about similarities and differences between Islam and Christianity, but that's just because that's what we're here to talk about, or else I could have, put Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and then we'd be here forever. Christianity, Jesus. As it relates to Jesus, the second part of the Godhead, if you like, born of the Virgin Mary. And in Islam, they believe that Jesus, I referenced that earlier to you, they believe that Jesus is a prophet. They do believe that Jesus was born miraculously. And they do believe that in the virgin birth of Jesus. So, again, a unbelievably big commonality. Super important. It's interesting how most of the time we can spend time in our heads kind of feeling like we're so far apart when we're actually a lot closer than we think. We really are. This is a huge point of commonality, and again, one that you won't get with other religions. The Jews don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and they don't believe in the virgin birth. The Buddhists don't believe that. The Hindus don't believe. Nobody else believes that. Okay? The atheists don't believe it. The agnostics aren't sure, right? So nobody else believes that. But in Islam, they believe that. There's actually an entire surah. Surah is the same word for chapter. There's an entire surah or chapter for Mary in the Quran. The purpose, another similarity pretty much. The idea of having reconciliation for man falling, God creating us in His image and loving us and giving us a way to come back to Him. The way it manifests is different. So although that might be the same, in Islam they look at, instead of just proclaiming the gospel, they believe that the gospel, they do believe in the gospel, the Injil is the gospel, but they believe that New Testament writers have corrupted and people have since corrupted what the gospel is. Practices. Gather on the first day of the week, take part of the Lord's Supper, we preach, we sing, we pray, we give. In Islam, there's 5 pillars. The Shahada is the profession of faith. What are they professing? That there is only one God and that Muhammad is his prophet, so pretty simple. Salat or Salli or Salah, however you want to say it. 5 times daily, they pray. Zakat is, benevolence, if you like, giving of alms. Psalm is the fasting during Ramadan. And then the Hajj is the pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. The only one on here that would be acceptable to not do and still be a righteous Muslim would be the trip to Mecca. If you are not able to make the trip because of a physical ailment or some type of financial constraint, they say that that's something that doesn't get basically held against you, and so to speak. But everything else they would expect to be kept. So again, very, very similar in terms of certainly the benevolence and the prayer, and we have a confession of faith as well, right? It's a little bit different, but some similarities, some differences there. Other holy books, we don't accept any other holy books. Doesn't matter what, the guy on the bike says and the tie. Doesn't matter what, I call them J-dubs, the Jehovah's Witness, the J-dubs, doesn't matter what they say. extra books in the Gnostic Gospels in the back of some Bibles that are made. No. There's many spurious writings that are not inspired, and because of that, they're not accepted. In Islam, they have obviously the Quran, and then they have what they call Hadith, which is a series of sayings from Muhammad used for daily living. It is not the direct word of God. We can go into this more if you want in the Q&A, but I'm going to tell you how I was raised and there are a lot of Muslims that were raised this way. The Quran was the only thing that my parents taught me was revelation from God. And that the Hadith was literally Muhammad would be walking around and they would write down some of the things that he did. Two very different things. Some Muslims will tell you that you need the Hadith. The Hadith helps clarify your living. And then there are a bunch of Muslims that tell you no, that are Quran only. You ever heard faith only? Quran only, right? So that's kind of the deal with the Hadith. And then if you want to ask about the Hadith, I can go in further about like what some of the problems are and why not accept the Hadith, why isn't it inspired, or we can talk about that. The afterlife, basically the same thing. Basically the same thing. I think that's a huge point of emphasis as well. Why? Because they're living their life in view of like, hey, we need to do the right things, because if we don't, there'll be a consequence. And we feel the same, right? We understand that there is a consequence to our actions. There's a lot of people that don't believe that in life. They might believe that in like a very practical, hey, if I walk in the middle of a bus, I'll get hit way, rather than a intellectual, philosophical, existential, my life is going to be spent in eternity one way or another. So this is an area of commonality between Islam and Christianity. Judgment Day, a little bit different here, a little bit different. Jesus will return, right? There will be a judgment. There will be a time that will happen. In Islam, they believe that there's a couple different beliefs. They believe that Jesus returns, but he's just a sign that the end is near. Others believe that he is a minor figure in the return. I'm going to tell you what I was taught growing up. What I was taught was that God was going to return, and that on God's right shoulder, Muhammad would be on his right shoulder, pleading with God to save all of the Muslims, to have mercy on the Muslims, and that Jesus was going to be on the left shoulder of God, pleading for mercy on behalf of all the Christians. That's what I was taught growing up. There's a couple different beliefs again. Some believe Jesus returns, and then that's actually like a sign that God is going to be coming back soon. And then some believe that Jesus is not involved at all, and it's a bit all over the place. Other religions not accepted, and Islam not accepted. Sometimes people will tell you, we're all going to the same place, or whatever. But I think the way that we have to look at that is like, really, again, I try and think logically as much as I can. When I put the address to this building in the GPS, I was given two different ways to get here. Now, both ways, I would have, in the end, gotten here, okay? But both ways would have been drastically different. That can work with a GPS, driving to this building. I'm not sure that we can, because that is the case, of how I might get to a particular place on Earth, I'm not sure that works existentially for the eternity. I don't understand the correlation. I think it sounds nice, right? So I understand the appeal. I don't think that there's a logical correlation to these things. Homosexuality, a point of agreement. We don't accept it. They don't accept it. Clothing, we would accept modest dress. They would accept modest dress. Do women have to wear? Do they have to be covered head to toe, etc., etc.? Ask me in the Q&A. It depends where you live. Okay. In Saudi Arabia, it's way more conservative and way more strict. In Lebanon, they were colonized by the French. Have you been to France? Okay. My mom, grew up in Lebanon. She was not covered head to toe. And most people in Lebanon are not. So it just depends. Marriage and divorce. leave father and mother, the two become one. What God joins together, let not man separate. In Islam, you can marry up to 4 as long as they can afford it and treat them fairly. Now, there's some dispute over what you can and can't do, okay? I'm not here to speak on behalf of all Muslims. I'm not here to speak on behalf of all Christians. I'm here to speak on behalf of what I believe the truth is, right, as it relates to what God has revealed. And then I'm here on my, Nick uses the word expertise. It's very nice, Nick. I don't know about expertise, but certainly some experience. I can tell you what I was taught. What I was taught was you have one wife. And that part of the reason why somebody might marry somebody else is, for example, in the case of a widow. My parents said, in the case of a widow that nobody would take in, you couldn't just move the widow into your house. So, mom of 2 is 28 years old. You're 30, your wife's 30, you're married with a couple kids. Her husband gets hit by a bus, leaves 3 kids behind. How do you take care of them? This was the way that the conversation was had in my house about what the religion teaches. Are there people that abuse this idea? Yes. Are there Christians that attempt to abuse God's grace? Yes. There's all kinds of things in the world, right? I'm not here to defend every single thing in the world. I'm simply telling you what I know and the way that I was taught and what I believe the appropriate teachings and understanding of the religion is when the religion is applied appropriately. Okay, so we'll talk about 3 main differences, which that's kind of the end of your slides. But what are the 3 main differences? And then 3 points to consider before we wrap up. The first one is the Godhead. That is a major point of difference. Okay? That is a major point of difference. The second point of difference, that is a major point, is the crucifixion. We believe that Jesus died on the cross and that he was resurrected. The way they explain Jesus' appearances is that Jesus didn't die on the cross. They give 2 explanations. One explanation is that the appearance of Jesus was put on the cross so that it appeared to people like Jesus died, which would then explain why you've seen him walk around a few days later. Parts of it. You still got to work around a couple other details, right? Like some big stones and how you get those moved and things like that. But you understand the point. Now another explanation is that someone who looked like Jesus was crucified instead. Someone who looked like Jesus was crucified instead. So then it was like, okay, they think he was crucified, and then they see him walking around a couple days later, and they're like, wow, he's resurrected. What do I have to say about that? Again, ask in the Q&A, but basically there's a few questions that you could ask about that. Probably the one that makes the most sense is like, how do we defend that? How do you say, like, well, how do we know that they didn't have a vision of Jesus? How do we know that it wasn't somebody that looked like Jesus? Great questions. And then the third difference, I think, is our justification. The way that we're justified through Christ, and the way that salvation plays itself out in Christianity is somewhat similar and somewhat different. In Islam, it talks about scales, and that your good deeds should outweigh your bad deeds. Do I believe that my good deeds should outweigh my bad deeds? Boy, I hope so. I hope I help people with their groceries to the car more than I do pushing them out of the way so I can go get to my car, right? Like, I hope I treat people better more often than I do treating them poorly. But it doesn't earn my salvation. Okay, my salvation couldn't be bought with the things that I did. They had to be bought with the blood of Christ. And my response to that is my good works. Ephesians 2, 8 to 10, right? The response to that is good works in Jesus Christ. Okay. You will talk to some, and fair enough, because I'm not here to, by the way, straw man any Islamic arguments. I'm not here to bash Islam. I'm here to talk about the truth. So I don't want to straw man it. There are some that will say, listen, we feel the same. We rely on God's grace too. And to an extent, I agree that they still need God's grace to be applied. To an extent, there's some infighting about how that works. And again, I'm neither here nor there on it, because it's erroneous to me, because I'm not a Muslim anymore. But even if that were the case, the fact that your scales might have something to do with that is troubling to me. And the reason why it's troubling is, again, because the reason why I'm doing something means everything to me. I'm doing it because I believe Jesus died for me when I was at my worst. Not God is saving me when I was at my best, or because I was a little bit better than I was bad. Has everything to do with purpose. What is the purpose of the reason why I'm going to try and do good things, right? Has everything to do with purpose. And I think in Christianity, that purpose is clear. And I also think that as a not really a sidebar, but I think the plan of salvation is very consistent, which we can talk about as well. But I think the plan of salvation from the garden, from the first sin that's made, the first mistake that's made in the garden, all the way to the cross, I believe that the plan is very consistent, and I believe that it's practical, right? So I'm not really, when I'm making like a leap of faith, if you like, in Christianity, I'm not really taking a leap. I think I'm taking like a step. I don't think I'm jumping from here to the door. I think that it's very logical, I think that's very practical, and I think it's evidenced by a lot of different types of evidence as well. So I think that that's a difference. 3 main points to consider. So our last slide. Here's something that is hugely common between the two faiths that I think, again, is like, I think you should use this. I think you should consider this. What is a true believer? What would we say a true believer is, in Christianity? And 1 John 3:18, little children, let us not love in word or tongue, but in deed and in truth. We don't think, right, that it's okay to just show up here, check off Lord's Supper, check off, I dressed appropriately, which, in a lot of, I'm glad Nick and I talked about this. In a lot of places in the country, I'm not dressed appropriately, right? So we won't get into that. And don't ask me about that in the Q&A. But we understand that it's not the things that we say as much, it's the things that we do, right? That's really what makes somebody a Christian. Do you have to confess the faith, and should you be willing to defend it, and et cetera, et cetera? Sure, 100%. But we can't say all the right things and then do all the wrong things. Then we're not Christians. It's pretty simple. In Islam, it's basically the same, which I think is a huge point of commonality that we should appreciate. I'll read this chapter 2 in the Quran, and verse 177, and I'll go back and break it down. It is not righteousness that you turn your faces towards east and west in prayers, but the quality of the one who believes in God, the last day, the angels, the book, the prophets, and gives his wealth, in spite of love for it, to his kin, to orphans, and to the poor, and to the wayfarer, and set slaves free. So before I even go on, think about what's being said. The Quran is teaching that what makes them righteous, the thing that doesn't make them righteous, because they're supposed to face Mecca when they pray, right? That's the holy site. It's not whether they face east or west. The Quran is saying that's what makes them righteous. Oh, I stood in the right direction to pray. The Quran says that's not the point. It's about the quality of the one who believes in God, or Allah. The quality of the one who believes in God, who believes in the last day, who believes in the angels, who believes in the book, who believes in the prophets, which Jesus is one of them, and who gives his wealth, in spite of love for his own wealth, he gives it. To who? To his kin, to orphans, and to the poor, and to the wayfarer, and to those who ask. And that person sets slaves free. It goes on to say, those who fulfill their covenants when they make it, integrity, people that keep their obligations, people that have that their word is important to them. And those who are patient in extreme poverty and disease and at times of fighting. Such are the people of the truth. I think that's a huge point of commonality. I'm telling you right now, the honor and shame system in Islam is a big deal. It's a big deal. If you are disgusted by the fact that there would be people who would say that they're Christians and absolutely live completely poor lives all the time, we all make mistakes, all right? But are in the building, and then the rest of the week, doing whatever they want. If that bothers you, it bothers a Muslim too. And it bothers them when a Muslim does that, because the Quran doesn't teach that's acceptable behavior. That's a point of commonality that I think that we have that's big. The concept of God, there's no reference to Allah as the Father. That seems obvious, right? Because they don't believe in the Godhead. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that the Father is personal. You know, are you close with your father, or were you close with your father, or was your father somebody that was like an important figure in your life growing up that you respected, that you loved, and that you looked up to? For most people it is, right? Well, the God of the universe, the first and the last, the Alpha and the Omega, is referred to as Father. That's very unique. Very, very, very unique. The Quran doesn't refer to God in that way. And the last thing is the love of God. I referenced it earlier, but the love of God in Christianity, remember in Romans, it wasn't when we were at our best, brethren, that God saved us. It was when we were at our worst. While we were still helpless, He died for the ungodly. Ungodly, not godly. Right? It was not when our good deeds outweighed our bad deeds. It wasn't then. It was the opposite. It was when our bad was really bad. And Jesus didn't count equality with God a thing to be grasped. He didn't account equality with God a reason to withhold His love and shedding His blood on the cross. I mean, the love of God in Christianity, again, you can have some cool stories, okay? You can have some Far East or, Asian, Hindu or Buddhist or, cool turtles and, beautiful things, okay? And I'm not saying that to be derogatory. I'm serious. You can have some beautiful cultures. You can have some beautiful stories. You can have all kinds of beauty. All right? Again, find me the one who is perfect and not just willing to die for the imperfect, but all of them. Sometimes we get so mad we won't let somebody get in front of us in the drive-thru. You know how they have the two drive-thrus at a lot of places now? And it's my car and it's your car. And I'm like creeping up a little bit. I gotta go. And so, what's my favorite? It's when they don't look. Because if they would just look over, it's usually me just going. But they're just like. Inching up a little bit. We won't even let people get in front of us, and they're not even hurt us, right? Imagine spitting in the face, essentially, of God with our sin, and then He's like, you know what? I'll die for you. And you're just like, makes me want to get on my hands and knees right now. I'm telling you. It's unbelievable. It's I don't know. It's special. But those are the 3 points to consider. And then in a couple of minutes here, we'll hop into a Q&A, and I appreciate your time and attention.
Give us just a couple minutes to sort things out, and we'll get going into the Q&A. We'll go to about 12:15-ish.